need to talk to you about this. It's been on the news, the national news, but not like hugely blown up. So I don't know if you've seen about it. It's an incident that took place in my hometown of St. Simon's Island, Georgia, a little island off the southeast coast of Georgia, right above the Georgia-Florida border, where I grew up. And a young man named Trent Laircamp had just graduated from high school. This just took place a couple of weeks ago. So he's graduated last spring. And some from the same high school I went to. And some kids who were seniors, are seniors in that same school, several of them, kids of parents I grew up with, invited this boy to a party, took him to the party, and tied him up, tied him to a chair, urinated on him, sprayed him continuously with water, with a hose, forced him to drink vodka and take some drugs. They're still figuring out what, but basically he was delivered by 3 boys to the emergency room, taking 6 breaths a minute, and needed to be put on a ventilator. And thankfully he is off the ventilator and out of the ICU and, slowly recovering physically and especially emotionally from this trauma. Evidently, this was not the first time that this happened. There had been incidents where he came home covered in spray paint and urine. Now, here's the issue. I mean, that's a big issue in and of itself. But here's what I'm struggling with. In this town where I grew up, there is a lot of disparity, a lot of difference between the haves and have-nots. There's a lot of kind of social and political power and a lot of good old boy kind of mentality. And, I saw it growing up even, if you were from a powerful family or a wealthy family, you basically could get out of things and off of things. And even recently, a few years ago, when I went down with my family to spend the summer down there to take care of my dad as he was, dying, basically, my son, Sammy, who you guys know well, was jumped by a boy and beaten up. And the reason he was beaten up was because he had been friends with this girl there, and she had a boyfriend, and Sammy saw the boyfriend kissing another girl and felt like he needed to tell his friends. So he did. I saw your boyfriend making out with this other girl. The boyfriend was furious and decided to beat Sammy up because of it. And the police were called even before I got there. And so I get there, I see my son totally beaten up, which had never happened before. And my husband and I decided that when we were asked, did we want to press charges, we decided that we did, because we wanted to give the message to Sammy that it's not okay that someone did this to you. You didn't deserve it. And there are consequences for these kind of actions. Like, we wanted to reinforce that for him. Now, we weren't wanting to send this kid to jail or destroy his life, but we wanted to make a statement. And then it became a bigger issue because the officer in charge completely ghosted us, would not respond to me, would not return calls, just ghosted completely. And probably would have continued ghosting me had I not made a stink on social media. And then it turns out that this boy who beat up Sammy was also a son of an extremely powerful couple with a lot of political power and social power and financial power in the community. So the police were wanting to sweep it under the rug and thought that they've ignored me long enough, I'd go back home and the whole thing would be forgotten. And I made a little stink. So the police officer eventually called me after all of this had happened, and they got some pressure from other people calling them after seeing what happened on social media, and said, now, I understand you want to drop the charges. And I was like, what are you talking about? I'm not planning on dropping the charges. And then he threatened me and basically told me that if I pressed charges, they were going to create charges against Sammy. They were going to bring him down there. They were going to, make trouble for him. This is a very powerful family. They're affiliated with this organization and that, there were a lot of threats. Now, meanwhile, Sammy's going off to camp. He's moved on from it. We just decided life is too short and we let the whole thing go. Okay. I felt really badly about that in a way, when just a year or two later, the Ahmaud Arbery case happened in exactly the same town. So then there was this big upheaval in the police department, as you can imagine, as a result of that. Thank goodness. I was thinking, thank goodness. And now here we are several years later with this young man having been brutally attacked, like violently, and almost died. And it's all on film. So this is the other huge piece of this, is that these kids who are seniors in high school not only did this to this boy who allegedly is on the spectrum. He hasn't been diagnosed, but his father said on many occasions that he has trouble telling, basically having trouble reading social cues and doesn't necessarily know when people are really his friends. And these are only the only kids that would hang out with him because they heckled and hazed him and tortured him. And this had happened several times before he ended up in the ICU. And so it's all on film. These kids filmed it for Snapchat. And thank goodness, because Snapchat is like the dark web for kids, and your images and videos immediately disappear upon being viewed. Some kid or some group of kids who were good kids actually captured took a screenshot, captured the film before it, or the video before it disappeared. And so there is a record and a video of this poor sweet boy being tortured. And this is the disturbing part. You see the kids torturing them, and then you see this whole group of kids watching, and neighbors across the street, 2 adults in 2 windows looking into the backyard where this was happening, and watching it and doing nothing. Okay. And then it gets reported to the police because this kid ends up in the ICU, and the police do nothing. Okay. And now the FBI has been brought in, and social media has been blowing up, and so the police can't do nothing. But they tried for almost 2 weeks to sweep this under the rug again, because these kids are children of very successful, powerful people in the community. They're all white, they're all wealthy, they're all have social power. And listen, the parents, I know some of them. I mean, one of the parents is the first boy I ever kissed. I mean, these aren't bad people, but their kids are doing bad things. And here's the thing that I want to say is that there's so many elements to this that are upsetting, and a lot of obvious elements that I don't even need to comment on. What this says about society, what this says about social media, what this says about what kids will do for likes, what this says about the way we treat each other, right? And honestly, what this says about, I'm struggling with this a little bit, because I know some of these parents. Now, the parents that I know, their kids were the bystanders, and that's really what I want to focus on. There were 3 or 4 kids that were the main perpetrators, but then a whole group of people on video who were standing there doing nothing and watching. Okay. And to me, that's almost, not quite, but almost as devastating, because we don't teach our kids enough about the bystander effect. And I can't believe, that's really what it traumatized me, to watch what was happening to this boy and to look at these other kids like doing something so evil and nasty to him. But what really traumatized me were all the people watching and doing nothing. And I'm just telling you, I guess this is a plea from one mama whose child Sammy was horrifically bullied and humiliated publicly and socially ostracized. And there were so many bystanders. And you have to teach your children not only not to bully, but not to be the bystander. And it's not just telling them, it's also modeling for them. They are watching you so much more than they're listening to what you say. So when they watch you, diss someone and not invite them to your barbecue and gossip about what losers they are, when they see you lying to a neighbor's face, when they see you watching a show and talking about how hideous that person is, or how ridiculous that person is, or they see you being critical of other people. They are learning. That is how they learn. It's not you saying, don't talk critically about other people. It's they are watching what you do and modeling after that. Okay. But they also need to understand not to be bystanders. And I can tell you, there were hundreds of bystanders to Sammy's bullying and humiliation. And he was extremely bullied. I mean, he ate lunch with the football coaches every day because it was so bad. He would basically hide. And so many kids, they all saw it and nobody said anything. No one, because they didn't want the bully to turn on them or because they thought it was funny or whatever. And so what I'm saying to you as a parent is, please, from this mother's heart, teach your children, not only through your words and your actions, not to be bullies, to be one of the helpers, as Mr. Rogers said, but also not to be a bystander, okay? Not only for the kid who's being bullied, okay? You don't want your kids to be a bystander for that kid who's being bullied, but even selfishly as a parent, you don't want your kid to be a bystander, because when something like this happens, they will never get over the fact that they stood by. Okay. So every one of those 11 kids who stood by and watched this boy be tortured and end up in the ICU, their lives will never be the same. Even if charges aren't pressed, even if they don't have legal consequences, this will never go away in their minds. And I can tell you that even watching, I experienced that firsthand when these kids showed up in the cemetery at my son's funeral. And I saw their faces and their shame and their regret, and they will never, their lives will never be the same. I know it. I watched them. I saw the pain in them and the guilt. And so even for your child's sake, so that they don't have to carry that consequence, teach them not to be a bystander. Our society is not going to get better. We are not going to end this division and this bullying and this evilness that is happening until we are willing not only to stop doing evil ourselves, but to stand up when someone is doing evil to someone else. And I don't just mean from the safety of your screen on social media by canceling people. I mean, even more powerfully and importantly, in your own backyard, in the schoolyard, in your communities. You model not being a bystander and teach your children to do the same, please. That's all I got.